Oh my God. I am really, really excited to have this conversation today. Gervase, how long have we known each other?
I don't know. Because I feel like I knew of you for a long time. And then I had like shared a meal with you, but I still was like, does he know who I am? Kind of a thing. So it's been at least like 5-ish years that I've known you.
5-ish years since we've interacted.
Yes.
And casually interacted. And then, I was on your podcast a few months ago where we had some interesting conversations about parenting and the male role. I think maybe one of the few men that you've had on your podcast. I think you've had a few.
Yeah. Well, I actually am like, I have more now. I feel like it was really a goal at the beginning to like really balance it out. But yes, you are still part of the special few. It's definitely heavier on the female perspective.
I'll take it. The male ego has to be, has to be nurtured quite a bit. So I need to know that I'm special.
Yeah, you are. You're totally special.
So thank you for that. Well, your work is so interesting to me and I'm so fascinated by it. And I'm so fascinated by like just alternative ways of thinking anyway, and alternative ways of being sort of that kind of go against the flow. Gosh, man, if people really took a deep dive into my life, they would see that like I buck the system at every single opportunity. And I think you might too.
Oh, for sure.
So
for sure.
Can we start with like how did you get here? I mean, the work that you do today, impacts lots of people. And I think in a very, very concrete, tangible way. But like, how did you get here? Before you were an entrepreneur, before you dove into this life, what were you doing before? And then was there a tipping point that sort of like propelled you in this direction? What was it?
Yes. I guess I just thought you knew the story. So, yeah. Oh yeah, there was a tipping point. Where was I before entrepreneurship? I was not bucking the system. I was happily just going along with the plans and the systems. And I was working a corporate job. I was in publishing. I had gone to school for communications, but I always thought like, I'm going to be a writer. Like I have things to say. I was in, theater school before that. So I was always just trying to figure out how to be me and like do it according to the plan laid out and make money. I was just like, whatever it takes. Right. And, so yeah, I was in a corporate job in publishing. And then I went from like editor to marketing. And then I went to sales. So I kind of found myself in a sales job at a publishing company. And I was pregnant with my first child. And I had been at that job for, I don't know, a few years and kind of had this feeling of like, this can't be it. But if this isn't it, then the it is a place you get to where you make more money. Because I just couldn't identify what was missing. And I just thought, well, what's probably missing is like, once I'm rich, this will feel so much better. Like it'll be worth this like monotony of like sitting in this freaking cubicle every day because I'll just have a lot of money. So, which I think is just so ironic, like the irony of just how asleep I was and how clueless I was to who I really was and like what my gifts are and what I was here to do it's very humbling. And also, it's a relief. I hope it's a relief to other people. Like you could really be really asleep and get to a different place that you never imagined. And so, I got pregnant and I had my first daughter 10 years ago and I went back to work after 3 months of maternity leave. And, that's the very relatable struggle of like, you have to like map out your days off and like, not get fired and, FMLA, like all this stuff that you have to do just to get like 4 weeks of paid maternity leave so that you can come back to work after 3 months if you're lucky. Some people have like 2 weeks. It's insane. And I went back to work and I figured out the daycare thing. I dropped my kid off at this daycare nearby that a lot of other moms took their kids to. And I then began the unraveling of just being so depressed. I was like crying in my cubicle every day, all the time. I would wake up in the morning and I would feel this like dread like creep over my entire body. I would like cry while I breastfed my daughter in the morning. And I would like pull her out of bed because to do this. It's crazy that the majority of the world does this. I mean, my heart just like goes out to you if you're in this place, because it takes so much pushing a boulder up a hill to like get your kid out of bed, pack all this stuff for yourself, for the baby, and put a newborn baby in the car. I drove like 40 minutes to Mount Pleasant, dropped the baby off at daycare, just crying, feeling that dread, feeling that like, what am I actually doing? And then I would be pumping in this closet, you know, to get the breast milk 3 times a day. And I just had this strange out of body experience where I just was like, is this it? We're all doing this? Like, is everybody okay? And also this feeling of like, a lot of people do seem okay. Like a lot of moms seem like this is working for them. But I was like, I am so not okay. I can barely pull it together and hide it. I was going to therapy, trying to figure it out. And, fast forward, I only lasted I switched her childcare like 3 times. And I think I lasted maybe 3 months working with the newborn. And then I remember I like came home one day from work and I sat down with my husband and I was like, so I think I'm going to quit my job. And he was like, I think that's a great choice, which is like, if you know my husband, he is like the most risk averse person on the planet. This poor man has been through like entrepreneurial hell like since then, because we had a plan. It was like, we were the 2-income family. We were just like fighting the good fight, doing the thing that we're all taught, like essentially brainwashed to do. And I remember telling him, you know, I've given this some thought and I've just realized like, if this is it, if I was doing all of this to make money, then I'll just waitress at night. I'm happy. I will pick up any gig I can find. The first gig I worked after I quit my job was like literally a week later. I worked the Family Circle Cup and I handed out Salon Paws. Do you know what those are? They're like these like pain patches. I think I made like $6,000 in a week handing out Salon Paws. Is the S silent? Does anybody know? I don't even know. I was great at this, obviously. But the point is, I was like handing them out and really using this part of my personality, actually, that I was like, oh, I can do this. Like, I can be extroverted. I can be social. I can do very uncomfortable things. I'm a theater kid and an extrovert, and I'm from Queens, New York. Fine. For $6,000, I am happy to rope helpless people into this tent and force them to put this patch on their body. So that's where I was at. I was like, if this is about money, fine. I will make money, but I would rather make money, you know, like on the weekends or working at night or working like one quick gig and make as much money as I made in like 3 months at my corporate job than do this. And I kind of got to that point where I was like, I'm resourceful, I'm resilient, I'm outgoing. So like, surely we can figure this out. And, as the story goes, I feel like I've been talking for like an hour already. As the story goes, literally the day after my last day at that job, I signed up for a writing workshop because I just thought, okay, where do I start? I don't know. I have no idea what's next, but I want to get back to my roots and like, what was a thing that I used to do that made me feel joyful, that made me feel creative? Like, I'm a creative, you know, like what am I doing? Selling anything. Like I need to be creating. And I went to this writing workshop with Stephanie Hunt, who's a local writer, if you know of her. And I sat next to a life coach. And this was before coaching was like cool. Now I feel like everybody's a life coach and it's super hip. And I've like missed that wave. But I was like at the beginning where people were like, a life of what? And I sat next to this sweet, like 70-year-old woman, maybe she was 60, I don't know, who was not like a trending life coach. She was just this woman. She was like, oh yeah, I help people see their problems from a different perspective. I help them solve their problems. I help them see the path forward and like what's in the way through talking and listening and asking powerful questions. And I was like, my whole body just had this like it was wild. It was a really fork in the road moment for me. And I just knew with every fiber of my being, like, okay, there's our green light. There's our green light. And I literally had never even heard of the coaching industry. I didn't even know what personal growth was. I had never read a self-help book. Like it was a total departure from the plan. And from there, I just dove deep into the well and never came back up for air. And here we are 10 years later.
Wow. So there are so many Excuse me. There are so many things that I would love to unpack in that story. And thank you for telling it. I knew part of it. I knew most of it, but I needed to set you up to tell it here.
Yeah.
But so I want to go back to this concept of like, so many people are just sleep at the wheel. Like
Yes.
in the sense of, I was talking to somebody on this podcast. I've probably mentioned it 8 times already, so people are going to get sick of hearing it. But since if you read self-help books and you've got into any of that, one of the best like business books or like self-help / business books of the last century is a book called Think and Grow Rich by
I've read that.
Napoleon Hill. Yeah.
You name it, I've probably read it, Jason.
Well, his other book, one of his other books was called Outwitting the Devil. Have you heard of this one?
No.
So he wrote it in like the 1940s, but his family wouldn't let him publish it because it was too controversial for the time. They actually didn't release it until everyone was dead. And like his foundation released it in like 2011. But he's having a conversation with the devil. Yeah. And it's basically like, asking the devil about all his tricks and like the ways he like takes control of the world and all of this stuff. And it's not really religious in any way, but it's just this really interesting conversation that, listen, if you go down this route, listen to the audiobook because it's really fun to hear the 2 different voices. But he says that like the secret to life is man's definiteness of purpose. And what causes people to not be happy or live a fulfilled life or just sort of, accomplish their goals and dreams, whatever it might be, is the habit of drifting. And, I don't want to give away the entire punchline to the whole book, but this concept of drifting. And, you mentioned that, like, is everyone doing this? Is everyone just sort of like, am I the only one going crazy here right now? Like that I'm like, not honoring my authentic self. I'm not living in my purpose. I'm not doing something that lights me up or that brings me joy. And oh, by the way, I'm a new mom and I'm trying to juggle it all on top of it. Like, is everyone okay? And you've probably found in your work, most people are not. Most people are not okay.
Yeah. The answer is no. Everyone is not okay.
But what we see on like social media and what we see like is that everyone looks to be okay and they live these like, the lives that we portray are very different. Or to your point, like the mask that we wear while at work or while doing these things, it's really strong, but we're not okay. And it's a system and a culture that we've created. And in my opinion, kind of keeps us on the hamster wheel of like, productivity, keep producing for the system. But you broke free from that and you were brave enough to take the leap, which is like the first key step is like, you just have to be brave enough to just like know that the step is there. You can't see it, but your foot is going to land on it. Like that's step 1. Step 2, you had a supportive spouse. I think that is absolutely critical. And so to be clear, there wasn't really any conflict when you said, hey, I got to make a change.
I mean, look, there was like so much that had happened between us. I mean, we had like a 6-month-old baby, our first child. I mean, we were like, we were just barely making it. You know what I'm saying? Like it was a hard time. It's a dark, confusing, like overwhelming time, that time in any couple's life when you have like little kids. But I think he was the one, and I can't, because this has happened. I've had this experience a couple of times where my husband is like, hey, you've been crying a lot. Like, do you think this might be depression? So I can't remember if that was one of the times, but I think that conversation had happened recently where he was just like, I really feel like you're not okay. And, like, what do we do? And so we have always been very good at those conversations. It's like one of my favorite things about the man. Like he was the only man I ever met who could just like call me on my shit, whether it was like sad shit or just like, what are you doing? And I'd be like, yeah, you're right. What am I? Yeah. Like he could really like put me in a place in a loving way. It's like that masculine, feminine, that polarity in us has always been a strength. So anyway, I think that had happened recently. And so I think he knew that it was like we weren't going to make it. Like this ship was going down. So it was like better for us to make a new plan that was like, let's just abandon the ship and like, let's find a new ship. And, we have been saying this thing forever, which is like, as whatever it is, like we can figure it out as long as we're together. Like if we just stick together, we can figure it out. And there have been many times where we have forgotten that, where we felt like we're like on opposite islands defending a different territory and kind of butting heads. And then, I don't know, through work, we'll like come together and be like, oh, we forgot the most important thing, which is if we can just stay on the same team, it just feels like you're not alone. It just feels like it's such a richer, that support, it just like feels so good to go through hard things with a strong support person. And also we can like create solutions from that collaborative energy. So yeah, it's not been perfect. And he's definitely had his moments of like, what in the actual F are you doing? But overall, he is an incredibly supportive spouse and always has been. And that's part of why I chose him. That's like who he is. And I do have a lot of empathy and compassion for women who don't have spouses like that, because it can be rough out there, Jason. I don't know if you know, but...
No, I know it can be rough out there. And I think it's what I've found in my conversations with other entrepreneurs and ones that have experienced any semblance of success in their life, or the ones that are just living their authentic lives. They're the ones with supportive partners. I mean, it's a common denominator.
Totally.
Amongst people, I think, that are living their best life. So this is a perfect segue to this idea of like this like window of tolerance for discomfort. And because clearly like you had gotten to a point where like you were just going to take this leap and you were going to go do something different. Like it just, something had to give. But oftentimes like people are so afraid of the discomfort that might come from change, whether that's, in a relationship, whether that's some internalized system or, way of being that they've always lived by. So how do you help people? What do you say to people, or just give me some examples of ways that you help and work with people sort of to get over that hump or to increase that window of tolerance for discomfort? Like, are there any, there are 5 steps to take? Are there books to read? Like, what do you suggest?
I'm like your worst nightmare. I will never give you 5 steps to take. Well, because here's the thing, like all of us are different. Like every coaching session I've ever had with a human, when I get someone in front of me, you have your own nervous system, you have your own, you got your gut brain axis, you got your personality, you've got your family of origin, you've got the systems you're a part of, you've got the color of your skin, you've got your, one of my clients has, what's it called? Like a health trauma. You've got your traumas. So that makes you this living, breathing, evolving organism that is always going to be so unique to the person next to you. And so when I am meeting someone for the first time or just working with them, I'm always just checking in with like, where is their system and what are the different threads here? Like what are we working with? What feels most painful? And also to answer your question, as far as the window of tolerance, where is their tolerance for feeling good? I was just talking about this with somebody this morning. Most of us are really comfortable. For example, let's talk about like pushing, right? Like productivity. We have become such great students of doing that we will push past our comfort zone of like what rest we need, our physical limits, sleep, mental capacity, emotional capacity, because we have been groomed to go, right? Like we've got this internalized capitalism that is just pushing us forward. And so we say that we are uncomfortable with this way of being. But in reality, what I have found is it's like a well-worn neural pathway. Like we have been doing this so perpetually for so long together that it actually feels much more comfortable to be part of that organism than it does to pause, rest, and feel good. So when I'm thinking about the window of tolerance, what I'm always thinking is like, where is this person's, what's this person's capacity for feeling good in their systems? And how can we shift them? Because, sometimes we'll just get caught on a loop of like the story about my husband or the story about my boss or my job or the kids or mothering is this and da, da, da. And that is true. Like, none of us are here to like negate anybody's real lived experience. And there's this thing happening where your entire system is organizing around these pain points. And so, my work with trauma is all about reorienting to resource to show the body what stability and security and safety and okayness feel like somatically, so that you can start to increase your tolerance to actually do the thing that you need to do, which is take a break. Because you're never going to take a break when you're on this hamster wheel, this capitalistic hamster wheel. You're never going to take a break if you haven't explored, even for 90 seconds, what it feels like to have space in your system, right? Wow. To have nothingness, to be. Because oftentimes what happens when we take a break is, guess what's there? A whole bunch of shit that you've been repressing and suppressing so that you could keep going. We've got emotions, we've got resentments, we've got rage, we've got sadness, we've got despair, uncertainty, all these, it's living right under the surface. And so it's terrifying to increase your window of tolerance to be with all of that stuff. And the way that we want to do it is by first practicing feeling good, feeling a little bit safer.
So, I my entire life, I think it's just programming, but my entire life, I struggled the most with taking a break.
Of course, you're a man.
I have such a hard time, stopping and taking a break. It is so difficult for me. What do you say to people like me that just can't stop?
Yeah.
How do I break that cycle?
I say, first of all, I just want to normalize and acknowledge, I have no idea what it's like to be a man in this culture, but from where I'm sitting, it seems really relentless and exhausting. And so I think it's really real. I think it's true that men are glorified for not taking breaks and men's worth and value is 100% attached to a productivity and what they bring in and money and right. And so that's tough. So, as far as how I would, have you break that cycle, I would say first, what is it like for, okay, wait, how do I want to answer this for you? Because now I've got your system in front of me. And so I just really want to be mindful of this for a minute. Okay. I think the question is, what are you afraid will happen when you take a break? Okay. And let's hold a little bit of space for that. And also, can we feel into a part of you, even just a little part that's like, oh, that would feel so nice. God, it would be so nice to take a break, because it's probably when people, focalizing is the modality that I'm trained in. It's the trauma-informed nervous system-based modality. And so when people close their eyes and they start to explore these different parts of us, the part that wants a break and also the part that's I literally can't, they're usually, it's like this polarity, these two parts of us that are in conflict. And so even just, I think of it as acknowledging who's in the room, It's oh, okay. So there's a part of me here that wants to take a break. And there's a part of me here who feels like I literally just can't. Okay, everybody take a minute, because that's the first time we maybe have acknowledged those two parts and given them a voice and explored where they live and orient in our experience as a man, and what's the emotion attached and what the fear is, right? So there's no quick answer for you, Jason. I'm really sorry. But it's this slow, gentle untangling of all of these parts of you that are in in battle, and creating just like slow space for us to like work with them all and see what is the resource that's needed for you to feel okay to take a break, maybe for 5 minutes, and maybe we'll do it live on a call, and maybe you're not going to do it, as soon as you hang up the phone, but just stretching your system to just practice, not when you're heated and activated and like, the smoke's coming out of your ears, but when it's just a good day and you're like, I really have to pee. I could hold it 20 minutes. It's like, what if I just peed right now? And I love like giving these examples because it's so funny to me how we've been literally like scared out of following our body's natural needs, like our survival instincts of literally like, get a glass of water and why don't you go pee? And I mean, like I will hold my pee for hours, and it's like, why do I do that? That's okay. So if I'm trying to like learn how to take a break, I'm not going to start by moving my workday from like 9 to 5 to 9 to 2. I'm going to start by like giving myself pee breaks when I actually need to pee. Right. So we're just changing things like, we say, I was just talking to a girl who said, what is it like when you shift it just 1%? You're not going to like break the cycle today and change your entire identity and your work-life balance. But what is it like when you shift it just a fraction of an inch in the direction in the direction you want to go?
Yeah. So what I heard was that it's a process.
Yes.
and it's incremental as you take small incremental steps in a different direction. There's not going to be this like ripping of one Band-Aid that like the whole entire universe shifts immediately. And you just made a beautiful case for people, like getting a guide to help them navigate the course, right? Having someone like yourself that could help them sort of like go through those steps, because the other thing I heard is that it's near impossible and no one has the resources or the tools to do it alone unless you've studied this stuff very deeply. And even then, we oftentimes still need a coach, right?
100%.
I had a sales job before, a corporate sales job before I went into full-time entrepreneurship. And my kids joke with me because they've heard me tell the story. Like I quit my corporate sales job and then they go, to get another corporate sales job, like they tell me that I'm in, they troll me now.
Touché.
But, fortunately I don't have to sell a whole lot anymore. But like I had a corporate sales job before I went into full-time entrepreneurship. And I read this book, some guy who founded some big insurance company and had experienced like a ton of success. But he was also like a high school football coach. And so he basically everything that he did in business, like was always like some, something that he riffed off of to like relate it back to like his coaching days. But the book was called Everyone Needs a Coach. And that stuck with me. Like just the title of the book itself stuck with me because I think that, in our drifting, in our masking, in our repressing, and all those things, like I think there's also this underlying tone in the back of our head saying, we'll get it figured out. I'll figure it out. I'll get it figured out. And we never do until we take those steps and we're brave enough to like make the phone call and say, I need some help, or I need someone to help me walk through this or help guide me through this. And I also find that, and it was right after. So I got married really young. We were like 21 years old and like didn't know anything about anything and got married. And, of course, that's always going to set you up for extreme success, in life. Your prefrontal cortex is not developed, but damn it, we're getting married. And you have no tools, no idea how to navigate life other than what, you've been taught by culture. And so I remember like a year in, we called a therapist and we're like, we don't know what to do. Somebody help us. And I remember like 2 or 3 sessions into this therapy, going, gosh, why doesn't everyone do this? Like every couple that's even considering getting married should be doing this before they get married. And so I just remember that really like it's kind of solidifying for me a long time ago, how important it is to have someone just help guide you through this crazy thing called life and all these challenges. And I think what you just, your journey specifically just speaks so loudly to, I think, everyone's journey, particularly moms and new moms and people that are, chasing something that they think they want, and they think money, the salary or whatever it might be, is going to be the solve. And it oftentimes never is. Jim Carrey just said something, and I'm 50-50 on whether I like what Jim Carrey says, but he said something recently like, I wish, or maybe it wasn't recently, it was like I don't know, some speech he gave, but he said, like, I wish everyone could experience this level of success that I have, because then they could realize that, all this money and all this success isn't what makes you happy. It isn't what fulfills you. And yeah, I think he's right. I think he's absolutely right. Gervase, I have one more kind of key concept I want to make sure that you and I talk about before because we could talk for 5 hours, it sounds like. But there's something else that you talk about a lot, and I want to make sure that we have a moment to talk about this, because you said it with you and your husband's conversations about how you balance the masculine and the feminine in your lives. And I think, in my experience, whenever I see couples that are at conflict with one another, like, and not like, look, we all have arguments, right? But I mean, like, ongoing, constant conflict that they can't seem to resolve, these loops that they get stuck in. My outside observation is that they're way out of balance in their masculine and feminine energies between the two of them. Tell me a little bit about the work you do there, and maybe some of your experience, and what you've found works for you and for others that you've coached.
Yeah. So this is like, oh my God, this is like a huge can of worms. And I just feel like most people have no idea what is in the can. I will say that something I noticed in myself always, I was raised by a really strong woman. She was like strong. She had big opinions, a big voice. She was always like kind of going against the grain. And she had this belief in her that it was her against the world, and she had to do it, and nobody would help her. And I have so much compassion for all the reasons and ways that was perpetuated for her. And I noticed in my marriage that there is a part of me that it is my mother. It's like this, I am right, and I need to be right, and I can do it myself. And I am like, I don't want to say better than you, but like this overpowering energy. And I think that a lot of women today have this happening for them in their marriages, and they are very confused by it, because the other thing that happens is that if you think about feminism, I've been like exploring this a little bit. There's multiple waves of feminism, but the message that we get from feminism, and I was like a feminism minor in college. Okay. So like we can all agree like Gervase is here for feminism, right? The message was a little bit like, I can do anything a man can do. Right. And maybe a little bit like, I'm maybe better. Women are better than men. And it was still working in this binary of like, I'm going to be over you, right? I'm going to dominate, or I'm going to be equal to. And so what I started noticing in my marriage was like this imbalance where I felt like unconsciously, with the best of intentions and like my big, open, messy heart that I have for my husband, I was at times when I was really angry, especially, or I was really like in my mothering, like I have to get everything done. I was emasculating my husband, because I was like, look at how powerful I am. I am that feminist, like get shit done, the girl boss, like all of this, especially for entrepreneurs. This is like a big thing for working women, especially for working women. I mean, there's so many ways this plays out, but it's like, we kind of just flipped it. Okay. So it was like, we took the patriarchy and we were like, this is bullshit. So we're going to flip it, and we're going to be like the girl bosses, and we're going to be in charge, and we can do anything a man can do. Right. And so we took on this really masculine energy. And whether that was from dominant culture, feminism, patriarchy, or our families of origin, or being raised by strong-willed mothers, it's not bad or wrong. It's just really interesting if then you notice the mechanics of that in your marriage. Because like what happens for me in my marriage, if I am holding the frequency of the masculine, is that, okay, now we got a polarity. So now my husband is the feminine. So now he's almost like emasculated. And also he doesn't have anywhere to go, right? He doesn't know how to fill his role because I'm doing everything. What we see right now, which I'm sure you're well aware of, is like women carrying the mental load and doing it all ourselves and, feeling a lot of exhaustion and frustration and resentment about that, rightly so. And there's a million reasons why that's happening. And I've spoken to those on my podcast and will forever be talking about this imbalance in the responsibilities and the home care. But the thing that we don't understand is that is perpetuating this dynamic in our marriages where our husbands are like, all right, I'm just going to like go make some money and maybe have an affair, like pick up some alcohol, like what, right? They don't have anywhere to really go. And I'm not trying to make the men the victims either. I'm just speaking from my own experience and what I've seen of saying like, okay, knowing that this is nuanced and nobody gets to be the good guy or the bad guy. What is my role here in my marriage and how can I shift this? And what have I seen work better? Because what I also know is that when I am in this like overbearing, dominating, get it all done and it has to get done just like this right now energy, this controlling energy, I don't feel good. I don't feel good at all. I actually feel strung out and totally unhinged. And it's not my natural way. Now, all of us have masculine and feminine. It has nothing to do with male, female. We all hold the masculine and feminine energies within us. But when I am 99% masculine, 1% feminine, I am not my best self. I am not in tune with like my intuition, like my purpose, my creativity, my nurturing, mothering part of me. And so I really had to get brutally honest with myself about what was I perpetuating instead of always waiting for like my husband to change who he was. And this is again, within a marriage that is like incredibly egalitarian and loving and supportive. So just imagine the range that this work can take. But I just had to really get honest. And I started to notice these moments like where we would be fighting and I would say the thing or almost say the thing and I'd be like, oh, that wasn't even me. That is like the imprint of my mother and her mother and her mother. That is like my mother line coming through. That is the tiny moment where I have this opportunity to make a different choice. Not because, I have to sacrifice myself on the altar of femininity, but because I can feel that that's not me. That is just an impulse. That is like my epigenetics, And so shifting this and working with this has been really interesting in my marriage. And we're very much still in process around it, but I'm just always exploring like the archetype of the king and how I can lean back instead of lean in. Like lean back and let my husband be the king. What is it like when he feels my trust, when he feels my respect, when I follow his lead? And what is it like for me to just be taken care of sometimes and just like lean into a different aspect of the household? And this is changing constantly, literally every moment of the day in our house with 3 kids and 2 jobs and a million things. We're always like dancing around this in different ways. And sometimes I hold the masculine, and I'm like, hey, you are pushing and you seem like you're about to fall apart. Like maybe you should stop. And he'll just go. And I'm like, I got it. There's that masculine. I got it. This is what partnership is. It's a dance. It's a collaboration. But it's not like me having power over you or me being equal to you. It's just respecting our differences and being so super aware of our own energy, of our own trauma responses, of our own patterns that we perpetuate unconsciously, and taking responsibility, radical responsibility for those, not because we're like doing them a favor or because we're like saying farewell to feminism, but because we can see like, oh, like what am I underneath all of the influences and the ways I've been, conditioned or raised? Who am I underneath there? Like what actually feels like attuned to my authentic self in this relationship, and just getting curious about that and experimenting with it and exploring it and giving us back our range has just been so great. It's just been so great.
The analogy of the dance really hits home for me, right? This concept of like, because I think people want, give me the 5 steps, give me the 3 things that'll help me get to this. And while for some that there may be a solution like that, but this idea that if you just think about this like dance, right? It's just, it ebbs and flows, and it isn't binary. It's not this like black, white, hot, cold. It's like, it's a constant dance. And I think we have to accept that as step one in order to try to find that balance. You just mentioned, 3 kids at home, multiple, you guys have your jobs, you have your careers, you have the work that you do. You probably carry the weight of a lot of women that you coach also, which I can't imagine the weight that comes with that. But, are there agreements that you and your husband have made, or you and your kids have made, or you and your family has put together that allows this to all work for you? Because I find balancing entrepreneurism and raising a family extraordinarily difficult also.
Yeah. What? So, that's just weird. It's like a total breeze for me. So,
but are there agreements or systems or anything that you all have in place that makes this work just a little bit better?
Yeah, I'm trying to really articulate them in my mind. So one that I've been really aware of the last 6 months, especially, I just did a podcast on this, is this idea of we are responsible for and get to resource ourselves first. This is kind of like a huge thing that I'm really trying to make normal for my kids too, because as we had one of my children have her PANDAS symptoms, her diagnosis with this autoimmune thing that's been going on, one of the symptoms is a high amount of dysregulation. And so making sure everybody in the house is protected and she's also protected is very challenging, because we all share this space. We have 5 different nervous systems, 5 different ways that we respond to triggers and sensory input and noise and tantrums and all of the things. And so really putting in place this idea that you don't have to do anything except go find what makes you feel good right now. Like, what is a place? You don't have to stay here. I'm saying this right now from a kid's point of view. Obviously, this is going to take a little bit of a different tone for a parent. So just hold space for the nuance, as always. But like for the kids, really, really modeling to them and enforcing to them, like, you get to decide what feels safe for you. And in this home, it's so important to me that you find spaces and places and ways to feel good as often as humanly possible. So if somebody is throwing a tantrum in here and you can't stand the sound, because we got 4 hypersensitive, high sensitive humans in this household, me included. Okay. So it is freaking intense. Okay. So it is your responsibility. And also, like, you get to remove yourself and you go find your space, and that space will be honored and respected above all things. And if you feel like your space isn't being respected and you're like, Mom, I need to be in my room because that sound downstairs and somebody keeps trying to get in my room, I really enforce those boundaries of space, because again, 5 people is a lot of people in one house. So that's one thing. It's just like self-regulating first, self-resourcing, everything that I do through my focalizing modality, it really leads with resource, like finding the ways somatically and just in the real world that you can feel good and safe right now. And so we're always resourcing. When my husband is triggered, we're really working through this. Okay, the kids triggered you. What is our code? Our code is you pause, you remove yourself, and you resource. The end. Oh my gosh. And we have so much conditioning that tells us, like, stick with it, or show them who's boss, or be gentle and like hold space for their feelings and all of this stuff. And what I've just found in my own experience and through my training is, like, the most important thing is each person's own nervous system and feeling a sense of calm and safety within, which is not always going to be possible because this is a real world. But in this home, as often as we can, if you notice that you are activated, you pause, you remove yourself, and you go back to your baseline, because you're no good to the family anyway until you can do that. So that's that's a pretty big one. Do you want me to keep going, or?
I mean, that's a huge one. I mean, I'm sure you've spoken for hours about that concept alone. No, that's perfect. That's gold. In fact, I think you've already given I don't know. I think if people listen to this 3 or 4 times over, even there are going to be there's 6 therapy sessions in here if people will listen. I mean, and I'm serious. It's really, there's really good golden nuggets in here that we've discussed. I mean, I'm so glad it's being recorded, because I was really mad I didn't have a pen and paper next to me just to be taking notes. So no, this has been really fantastic. Is there, and I so appreciate you sharing so freely so many of these tips and so many of these things that you do and that you've seen and that you've learned over the last decade of the work that you do. I think this is going to help a lot of people. Is there anything you're working on right now? Anything new coming up in your future? Anything you want to share that you're working on? Or is there something that you've just finished or recently done that you'd like to point people to?
Yeah. I mean, I honestly just redesigned my coaching packages. So now I have 3, 6, 12-month packages, which feels really good for me. And I created, you can just go to my pages and see. I'll give you the link in the show notes to see kind of what I'm working on, but really integrating the archetype of the Phoenix into my work has been what I am doing right now to really walk this Phoenix path of burn down what's not working, rise from the ashes, burn down what's not working, rise from the ashes. I really have been exploring this for a few years now, this cyclical evolution, constantly reinventing yourself, constantly refining what is not working, what is not mine, what am I carrying, what are we doing, what are we perpetuating, and just getting curious about it and thinking of myself as a constant work in progress and a kind of this masterpiece that I'm just always working on. So my brand is catching up with that part of my work, and you can check all of that on my pages. And then, just check out the It's All Me podcast and go find your episode on there. And you can always find me on Instagram too, at Gervase Colmos.
Perfect. I love that. Gervase, thanks so much. Thanks for joining me today. This has been so much fun. Thank you so much
for having me.
No, This has been so great. I'm going to immediately go listen, because I'm going to go take another therapy session here.
Happy to help.
Thanks so much.
All right.